Brendan Reeves. I've been going to this group for probably about 2 years now. Finally decided to present. So I'll be going over Firebase tonight. First half is mainly just going to be talking about what the products, all the products they have are. But the second half is going to be a live coding demo. There's a link on the Meetup event page if you guys want to follow along to download the source code. You can. It's not required, but it's there. You can, and it'll also be there for reference. The slide deck is also there for after the event if you ever want to come back and look at it. But before we get into this, I want to make this very clear. I am by no means an expert in Firebase. I have only been using it since roughly the start of the year. Don't know everything. My main focus is on with Firebase is for mobile. But if you do have questions, I am more than happy to try and answer any questions you may have about Firebase. If I don't know the answer myself, I can try and point you in the right direction. So, what exactly is Firebase? Firebase is a suite of products that was originally started by a startup in 2012 that was eventually bought by Google that offers easy solutions for developers so they don't have to worry about developing an entire back-end infrastructure, and they can focus on the features that are most important to their users. Oops. They can do, at this point, just about anything relating to back-end in your server. They have secure authentication built in. You have free web hosting for progressive web apps. There's NoSQL databasing. There's 2 different versions depending on what you're looking for. They have anonymous cloud functions, so you can have an endpoint to just send data at, and you don't have to have a server to run all your server-side code. They've got mobile analytics to complement your Google Analytics if you want to have those on mobile. They have cloud messaging, which is the new version of Google's cloud messaging. They ported that over to Firebase. So that's all your notifications on Android, iOS, and web. And they have so many more products for mobile developers. It's crazy. It's growing rapidly. This time, a year ago, there was only roughly these, but they've gotten to the point where there are tons of stuff. They have machine learning, custom analytics, custom targeting, so many things. But who's actually using it? It's the real question. So there are tons of people using it. These are just a few that I picked off the top, but they have several million developers that are actually using it in their apps today. The big ones that they advertise are going to be the New York Times uses it as their back-end infrastructure, as well as Shazam for some of their machine learning and user systems, as well as Todoist to keep track of all your tasks. So, let's start with what Firebase Authentication is, because this is the big one that's generally associated when you say Firebase, is your authentication systems. It works in every single platform you can think of. It works in mobile apps, it works in web, works in games, works in Node, works in Java. It is the most comprehensive product that they offer. You can use various different forms of authentication, from using usernames and passwords to log in with your email, to using anonymous authentication so people don't actually have to give their personal information to use your application. You can use your Google account to log in seamlessly. You can also use your Facebook, your Twitter, your GitHub. They also offer phone-based authentication, so your users don't have to create an account at all if they're on their phones. They can just put in their phone number, receive a text message that lasts with a one-time code, and that one-time code is their password for that one instance, and their account will persist. They also have custom hosted authentication systems. So say you already have your entire authentication system set up, but you want to leverage Firebase authentication for whatever reason. It does support that. It's not as easy to start up. You do have to do more work on your personal backend to get that up and running, but it is supported if you want to use it. They also have a pre-built UI library for almost any platform as well, so you don't have to worry about getting your login pages, your user flow, the forgot password, all those various screens and designs that you would have to make. They can handle it for you. The libraries are really easy to implement. On web, it's about 10 lines of code to just drop it into your product. Super simple. On Android, it's about the same. It's a little bit more complicated on iOS, but it's fairly simple to drop in. They've also got custom UI support. So you can, say you don't want to use their pre-built UI libraries. You can use your own libraries, your own whatever you want to make your UI yours, but still be able to leverage your custom software. And the best part, It's backed by Google's security system. You don't have to worry about the security of the usernames and passwords that go across your network. It's not something you have to worry about. They handle all of that. So it's also really easy to drop into existing projects. If you have a product already that's needing authentication, you can drop it in and essentially tell it, I want this stuff firewalled from not logged in users, and this stuff is what regular users can handle. It makes it super easy to just plop that in there and get started. So the pricing, it's free. So one of the few products that they have is 100% free with one little caveat. The only thing you ever have to pay for is phone number authorization. And even then, it's fairly cheap. You get 10,000 text messages sent a month, so that's 10,000 login attempts. And then it's 1 cent in the US, Canada, and India, or 6 cents per text message in all other countries. I have this pricing structure on the other apps. One thing of note about the pay-as-you-go, the pay-as-you-go plan is the same thing as the free plan. So while it does say up there that you have 1 cent per verification, you do get 10,000 free first, so it's not like, oh, I need to have this whole custom system built and it doesn't fit into the free plan. You still get all that. It's just built on top of it. So now to the next one. This is actually what's powering the application tonight, Firebase Hosting. It is a wonderful product if you are using a progressive web application and you're not needing anything that has to do with server-side custom rendering or like C# or .NET that needs compiled. This works perfectly. It's backed by those same CDN servers that Google uses to help get your web application to wherever it needs to be, wherever in the world, with fast load times. They also manage your SSL certificates for free. Who has tried to set up an SSL certificate before and dealt with that headache? You don't have to! Once you link your domain to Firebase, they handle all of your SSL certification. You don't have to worry about it. It's backed by Let's Encrypt, so you don't have to pay a single penny for it. And the best part about this, the one I like the most, is that you have rollback features. Say you accidentally deploy something that breaks absolutely everything, and you panic. You can roll it back. As far as I'm aware, there's no limit to the history of the rollbacks. I'm sure once you get into the hundreds or thousands, it'll limit you. But for all of my projects, I've been able to roll back to the start date of the project, if need be, should things break. But it doesn't support everything. Sites using services such as PHP as their backend will not work. .NET Core will not work. ASP.NET will not work. Sorry. Is what it is. But it is very, very cheap. You're able to use it on the free plan. You get a gigabyte of your data stored onto the server a month for free. You also get 10 gigabytes of bandwidth. If you go over that, it's fairly inexpensive. Unfortunately, with the free plan, you can only have 1 site per project, but you can have up to 14 different projects for free before Google starts hounding you and asks you to pay a lot of money. The $25 plan increases your gigabyte storage to 10, and you get 50 gigs of bandwidth. And if neither of those fit you and you're in between the free and the $25 tier, they do have custom, fairly cheap pricing. The bandwidth, not so much in comparison to other services. But if you do pay, you are able to host more than 1 site on each project. So that is not a concern for most people, because generally you'll want those siloed off anyways. And the last main product I'm going to go over before we do our live coding is going to be Cloud Firestore. So Cloud Firestore is one of the 2 database systems that I mentioned earlier. It is available on every single platform that supports Firebase. Even if you're using Unity, it does support Unity if you're making any games. It automatically syncs all of your data across devices with live reload. So say you have a chat system, which is what we'll be building tonight. One person can send a message, and the other person on the other end of the chat, their phone will automatically reload. You don't have to handle any of the data except for updating your view with that data, however you want to do that. It supports offline by default, so if your user is going through a patchy area, as long as the data has been pulled down from the server already, it's there, it persists. Only way it goes away is if the user removes it or if you manually clear it. it scales automatically, so you don't have to worry about spinning up a server with only X number of resources and then having to go back and reallocate that server for more resources. It does it automatically. You don't ever have to worry about it. And just like the authentication, all your stuff is secured by the Google security team. They're also, this particular security team is also the one that manages all of Google's OAuth logins, so you know it will be secure. So the pricing, this one's a bit more convoluted. I'm not going to go over all of this. This is all up on the website. All these pricings that I've listed were valid as of when I made this presentation on the 5th. They may change in the future. They've been this way for about a year now, so hopefully they won't change. But let's get to coding. So if you want to follow along, that is the URL for the source code. If anyone wants to pull that down, I'll leave it up there for a second. But what we're going to be building tonight is we're going to be building a very simple chat application that allows users to log in using Firebase Authentication, log in with their Google accounts, and be able to send messages that are backed by Cloud Firestore that will also be hosted on their hosting platform. So, does anyone else need that link at all? All right, if you need it, let me know. But let's get started. Come on. Let's do this. All right, so when we're done, this is roughly what the application is going to look like. Let me blow it up just a bit more. So when we're done, we should be able to just easily be able to log in with Google, sends us off to a login page, select our account, send us straight back to our application, and immediately be able to send messages. So let me pull it up the project. Okay. Is that too big, too small? Can everyone see that? Can anyone not see that? Yeah, let's turn the light off, see if that helps at all. Is that better? There we go. All right, so let's get started. So I've already got some starter files in here that just go over the basics of the things. That way we don't spend all the time here styling the page. When you first start up a Firebase project, you're going to need a few basic things. For any Firebase web application, you're going to need to import this Firebase library. Now you may notice that this isn't on a CDN or anything. Since I've started up this project with the command line interface that Firebase offers, and it's being hosted on their services, I don't have to worry about plopping in all these stuff. It just automatically generates it for me. But anytime you do have a Firebase app, if it's going to use any of the services whatsoever, you do have to import this Firebase app. But all these other ones, Firebase Auth, Firestore, are included based on what you need. You can swap them out if you're not using Firestore. You can remove it if you're using their database services. You just change Firestore to database. It's good to go. And then I've also, for this project, we're going to be using their Firebase Authentication UI, just so we can get started a little bit quicker. So they do have a CDN. All this stuff on here is posted on their documentation. This walkthrough will also be following very closely to the Getting Started Code Lab for web. So after this presentation, if you want to go home and either rewatch the presentation or go through and actually program it yourself, they have a wonderful tutorial to walk you through. This is kind of a bare bones basic. I've stripped some of the complicated stuff out to get us running. So first thing we need to do is, let's go ahead and run this. So this is what we have right now. Right now, we just have an empty box here. We don't have our login. We've got an empty account profile up here. And so what we need to do is, for starting, we need to get a button here to log in. So let's go ahead and pull this up. All right. So let's go ahead and create a link to log in. Should save it. Should be there now. Doesn't do anything. All right. So now that we've got our button on there, let's go ahead and go back over to our JS file. I've got a few basic things loaded in here already. I'll go ahead and walk through these individually. I've just got a few basic global variables for use at the top here that are used in various parts of the application. But the main thing here that we're going to look at is updating the UI. So there is a system that will automatically listen in the background for all of your login updates that runs automatically. So let's go ahead and start this method. So where is it on here? So right here, all I'm doing is essentially I'm passing in a user object saying the state of my application has changed. Someone's either logged in or logged out. So if user is null, then we know that they are actually logged out. But we know that they are logged in. So we're going to actually, just to make sure we get this written out, log. So now logged in. Actually, I didn't actually set up the login. Hold on. Let's do that first. Let's actually get the login portion. So we always, one thing I've noticed with Firebase is that it does not always load everything in properly. So we always need to wait for the DOM to load. There's that. Alright. So when we first start up our application, we are going to be using Firestore, so let's go ahead and load that in. So I've already got my database variable up there, so I'm just going to set database variable to be Firebase dot Firestore. Go ahead and initialize that object. And then I want to go ahead and pass in some settings. So for this main application, the only setting we need to set is a callback for, or actually allowing timestamps in our time shots. That way we know when things are coming in. You can always omit this, it's not required. If you ever have any additional configurations that you want to add, you can just add them in here. For this instance, I'm just going to set this true. And then, let's see here. That should be initialized now. We also are going to be using Firebase Authentication. So in order to set up when Firebase actually logs in a user, we need to tell it the auth library should be listening for on and auth state change. That we want to call our auth state observer, and it will just automatically pass in that user variable for us. We don't have to worry about that. And the last thing we need to set up, variable-wise, is going to be our messages. So we haven't seen this yet. But I'm going to go ahead and put this in here just so we don't forget. There will be a section, I think I actually already have it in here. Down here where we have our messages container, all I'm doing here is I'm targeting this section, saying this is where I want to put all my messages that are being spat out by the system. So, I'm just going to grab that. Get on it by ID. And my ID is going to be... Where is it? Message. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. Let's save that. All right. So then the last thing we need to do is actually set up our login button so we can actually log in. So we're just going to do this.
I missed something. You had 3 divs with the same class ID.
Yeah, I think I might have actually. Let me check my completed version because I think I copied over the wrong final version. Hold on. Yeah, I don't know why. Oh, they all had the same ID because this was automatically built by Firebase by default. This is not the actual correct ID. I am missing things. We need this. This did not get put in here. So, is that all I have? Yeah. So that message ID essentially just loaded this box. I was too lazy to go back and actually change it to be a class. But that would be that. I think that's everything we need, except for changing this to chat messages. Instead of message. Okay. So now that we have our login button up here, we actually need to set it. So I'm just going to use jQuery to grab this. Set a event listener for on click. So when I click, I'm just going to pass in the event. Then I need to set up my provider. So whenever I use Firebase for authentication, I have to explicitly say what providers I want to use. In this case, I'm only wanting to use Google, and I know that this particular button is going to be using the Google authentication provider. So all I have to do is set it equal to a new object of Firebase .auth.Google auth provider. Just initialize that. And then to log in, I just do firebase.auth.sign in with pop-up. And then pass in my provider that I set. So now, if I go load my code and click login, should, so I did that wrong. Did I type that in right? Hang with me for just a second. State provider. I'm in the demo folder, right? Ah, that would be why. It's settings, not setting. I got that right. Oh, shit. Does anyone see anything that I'm missing to that on click?
Do you have jQuery set in?
Do you need to do an actual on-click as opposed to a click?
We could try that.
Well, that's not the exact syntax.
Yeah, I know. Hold on.
You can do on with the first parameter of string click. Yeah.
Ah, yes, thank you. Alright, let's see if that hits it. That's still not hitting it.
You have your original code and compare it again.
Yeah, I do. I have it on here. I imported jQuery, right? Right? Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Ah, that's why. That's not a valid variable for this. Timestamp. That's why. Timestamps. We're just going to get rid of this. There we go.
Yay.
Whoa! Joys of live coding. All right, so this will pop up to my login. I can just select my account, and nothing changed. However, we are logged in now. Woo! All right, now we actually got to change up our UI. So let's go ahead and add in. I believe I already have it up here. I do not. We need to have a logout button. So I'm just going to plop it in this protected section. ID equals.
Is there an automatic thing in Firebase that will log you out if you, after a certain period of time?
I do not think so. I know if you reload the web page if you reload the web page right now in this bare basic bone state, it will log you out just for the way it is set up. However, you can set it to time out your logins and have persistence. But in this case, I've set it up so that it just keeps me logged in during my session, and then when my session ends, I have to log in again. So
Just for the page or for the whole site?
Right now, this only affects this page. I believe as long as I have my Firebase init up here, which essentially just defines all the needed variables of what project I'm working in Firebase and my account ID, as long as I have that along with the app and auth, I believe your login state will persist because it's done through cookies. So let's go ahead and add in a logout button. So let's just put in a message here saying we're actually logged in, because we don't want the user to think they're not logged in. Just gonna say welcome. Then so put in an ID, same. It's my logout button. And I'm gonna put a class on it saying that it's protected. Actually, it's already up there. Don't need it there. So I haven't set up the protected class, but essentially all this is going to do is in my JSON or my my JavaScript file, I'm just going to target it saying that as long as something's protected and I am not logged in, it will have a display of none. If I am logged in, go ahead and display it. There are much better ways that you can secure your data by putting it behind walls. But for this case, we're just going to toggle if it's displayed or not. So now that we come down here, let's actually throw in some code to change whether or not people can see these protected areas. So I'm just going to use jQuery here for the simplicity of it. Alright. So for each object that has a class of login, so we can hide our login button. I think it's login. Yeah. Each item that has a class of login, I am going to hold on. There you go. For each login, I am going to pass it to a function. That's not how you spell function. Jesus. Oh my gosh.
No pressure.
I know, live coding, it's great. So I'm just going to say for this object, I'm going to add a CSS class, or I'm going to add a CSS property that says display. Display, it's going to have a value of none. And then I'm going to have the same thing down here for protected. And I'm going to have display as a block. So, and let's go ahead and replicate this code for if they aren't logged in, just with the opposite, so that if they aren't logged in, it will display as a block. And if they are not, we won't display the protected sections. So, that's not working. That's protected. I think I'm still logged in. Let's go ahead and wire up this logout button. So in our case, for our logout button, it's going to be super simple. So if you ever need to log out a user in Firebase, it is as simple as let's do on, click, it's just going to be firebase.auth.signout. Then when you do that, console log it saying signed out. So if we go back over here, let's go ahead and pull up our console. Clear that out. So right now, don't know why there's a breakpoint set there. Right now we're logged in, and let's log out. We're signed out. Woo! So if we log back in, it'll pull up that same window, authenticating, asking what account you want to use, and then it'll spit you all the way back to our page, and now we can see all the data that's been hidden behind our protective wall. Easy peasy. Woo. So I'm going to actually stay logged out in this instance. So now that we're logged out, the next thing I'm going to tackle is the profile icon. So anytime you're using a third-party service like Google, Twitter, GitHub, Facebook for your login, you're able to pull in various things about their account. You're able to pull in their name, their profile picture, basic information about them depending on what service you use. For Google, if you like Google Plus and they use Google Plus, you can pull in that data. But who uses Google Plus? Just but yes, so let's go ahead and actually pull in that data. So I've actually put in a just a blank profile icon in here. But we're going to change that out when I log in. So I'm just going to grab the profile pic. I said that's, yeah, profile pic. I'm just going to change the attribute source, and then I'm going to set it to one of two things. So sometimes they won't actually have a user profile. Say like they logged in with their phone number. They won't have any user data about them. They'll just have their phone number. So we're going to put this as current user, which gets us the data about the user. And it's going to be photo URL. So in this case, I'm just going to assume that they have a photo. And then I save that. I reload it and log in. There we go. And when I log out, I haven't changed it. So now, when they log out, we don't want them to have their profile picture still there. So we want them to actually know that they're gone. So we can just change this. In my project, I have a file called images/profile placeholder .png. So if I go back, reload it, helps if I put in an actual path. Let me just get the path. Plop that in there. Should, if I can get that to pop in right. What's going on? Oh, that's why. Alright, I forgot I was in my demo folder. So now if we load that up, there we go. So we log in, changes the profile picture, log out, resets it back. So that's all the basic things about my profile. So now I actually want to be able to get my messages from the console. But before that, since I don't have any data in here, does someone want to actually go to firebase.brendan.xyz/intro and log in and send a message, just so we can have something in here to reference.
I can email you at that address.
There we go. All right, we're going to go with that. So now that we actually have data in there, we're going to be able to load it in. So I'm going to come down here to my load messages. And loading stuff from your Firebase database is really easy. Oh, sorry, Firestore. It's not Firebase. Firebase database because that's a different service. So in this case, I have a collection called Intro to Firebase, specifically for this talk, and I want to load in my data. So to do that, I can either query directly by the document ID, or I can say I want all documents in this collection. So in this case, I want every single document in the collection, and I want to order it by the time that it gets submitted. And then, in order to actually get the data, I need to call on Snapshot, which essentially just takes a snapshot, just returns a promise of a snapshot of what's actually in there and gets returned from your query. Just put snap. Now we can actually handle the data that we're getting from that snapshot. So in this case, I'm going to just console log out the data I receive. So in order to get the ID of the message, I just do it. In my case, hold on, jumped ahead. Now that I have my snapshot, I actually need to get the data from the snapshot. So the snapshot is just going to be an object that has items of objects. It's just going to be a giant map. So for this, I'm just going to do snap for each, and we're just going to have it as a function. I'm going to return the message, and with that message, I'm going to console log that message's ID, the message's data, and I'm also I'm just going to log that. So now, if I come back over here and go to my console, and that's the wrong console. So now if I come back over here, I have to reload the page. Log in. Go over to my console. I can see all these messages that were sent. I don't know if you guys can see it very well, but this has all of my data. It's just, it returns an object that has, in this case, a message, a name, a time, and the user ID of the person that submits it, which someone just put in a message. So now we actually need to load in all of that data we're getting. So let's actually go down here to display message. Go ahead and write this out first. I have a template that I'm going to copy because I don't think you guys want to see me write basic HTML this entire time.
I don't know.
We love HTML. Do it.
Do you really want to see me write this message template with all these classes that I don't even know off the top of my head? Okay, now that I got my template, I can work with it. This is gonna be kind of dirty, but oh well. I'm realizing as I did this that I did like half of this in jQuery, half of this in regular HTML, or half. I don't even know what I was thinking last night. But essentially, in here, I'm passing in the ID of the object that is being stored in the database. I'm passing in the name of the person that made it, what they said, and their user ID. I'm passing in their user ID because I want to be able to actually tell if it was myself that sent the message at some point or someone else. So we don't want to have everything in one column.
You have more attributes that you can pass in, like a tag or a catalog or something.
Yeah. So all
Show
yeah.
like a threaded or
Yeah. So all this information is this data is actually stuff that I'm putting in the object myself. I've already got this object made. I'll show you how to make it here in a minute. But Firebase supports custom objects if you want to use them for Firestore. They support almost all data types. As long as it can be converted to a map, a JSON map, you're fine. So you can store your date time, your strings, your bools. I'll just pull up the list because I can't rattle all this off the top of my head. I'm just going to put it blank. All right, we got strings, numbers, booleans, a map, which is essentially an object, an array, a null, timestamp, geolocation, or a reference. And this reference just references another document. So you don't have to requery everything. You can just get that one document while you're doing this. This is one feature that Firebase Real-Time Database does not have. They do not have the feature to reference other objects, which really sets Firestore apart. and allows you to leverage it a lot easier in your applications and make your NoSQL easier to navigate. So you don't just have one huge structure with barely any relations. They let you do those relations. So now that I've got the key of my message, I'm going to check to see if that div actually exists, because our code is going to run every single time. That snapshot code is going to run every single time that someone submits a message, and we don't want those messages to be appearing every single time they load. We want to keep the same one. If for some reason it got changed in the database, we want to update that. So in this instance, if it does not exist, I'm going to create a container. Document.createElement. And I'm just going to have it be a div. And then I'm going to set that container's inner HTML to be equal to my message template that I put at the very top of my file. So then let's set the div equal to that container's first child. That's not right. And then I'm going to set the attribute of that div to being its ID. I want that ID to be that same key value, so I'm actually now keeping track of that's the message that I'm referencing for later on. And then I have a messages array that at the a messages object at the very top of the file that just keeps track of everything. Pen child div. So that adds it if it doesn't exist already. So now this is the code that we want to run no matter what. I'm going to do a query selector on this to find the name field of my template, and I'm going to say I'm going to set the text content to equal, just going to do dash dash, and then I want to set that equal to whatever the name of the user that I'm passing into this object. And then if there is text in their message, which hopefully there is, I'm going to do that message. I need to select that message. So let's create a variable called message element just to get that data. It's actually a query selector from div. And then if there's text, I want to set that message element text content to equal the text that we got. And then lastly, I'm going to replace any potential line breaks that were sent in that message with an actual line break in the code, because last thing we want is for everything to not be formatted properly. So message element dot inner HTML replace repeat, and then we're going to replace just with a simple I cannot think of the word off the top of my head. Place regex. There we go. There's the word. I'm just going to use some regex to replace any line breaks with an actual break tag. And then lastly, if the UID of that object is my Firebase user ID, current user / UID, then I'm going to take this div and add a class that I have set some styling to for my message. So now we shouldn't actually see anything when we go load this up. Shouldn't. So yeah, we're not calling it. So now we actually go to display our message. The first thing we're going to pass in is that message ID. And then we're going to, whenever we want to get data from this object, we do message.data. And then if it's a map or any other object in here, I can just say dot the name of the object. So in this case, it's going to be their name, and then it's going to be message.data, and then I believe I set this also to be the word data, and then this one's just message.uid. So now, if we go reload this, well, it's better than nothing, but where are our messages? We got the names, but nothing else. Let me see. What did I pass in? Ah, it's not data, it's message. I'm an idiot. Okay.
I'm an idiot.
Well, there we go. And there's the one person that didn't put anything in.
He did. It's just.
I mean, just press send. I don't have any checks in here to make sure you actually put in data. Oh boy, this is a bad idea. This was a bad idea.
My finger slipped.
Here, let's just see. I have a solution. It's called deleting everything. There we go. Now, unfortunately, this does not update the list. I haven't programmed anything in here to say if it. I haven't put anything in here saying that if someone actually deletes a message in the database, it doesn't get rid of the fields. It's beyond the scope of this. You could do it by using queries and just looking to see if any of the IDs that were returned from that object exist in your page, and if they do, just remove the div. So if I reload this now that I've cleaned it out, I should just see all the proof emojis. That's all we should see. So now, we actually want to send a message, because if we put something in here, I mean, it'll reload the page because I don't have it doing anything. Also, I don't know how it got in here. That was really strange. Oh, because I put it on the actual site. That's why. Okay. Let me just reload this. Okay. So now let's actually go to send a message. Sending a message is pretty much this, looks very similar to actually getting data. It's just going to be your database collection. And this one is intro to Firebase. In this case, you can specifically specify that you want to add a certain name of an object. So I could type in add, and then in here I could specify a name. However, I don't want to ID it. I just want it to automatically have its own ID. So I'm just going to put in an object here, say the message element is going to be equivalent to whatever the value of message input is. Val. And then I'm also going to set the time to be date.now, not fate.now. My fate is to mistype everything. The unique ID, so we can identify the user, is just going to be your firebase.auth-current user.uid. And then finally, I'm going to save the name of the user so that other users know who it is and they don't have to do queries to find that user.
You said that the names of these fields were all you made them up in your database?
Yes, so all these fields, I could put whatever I want in here for the names and values. This is all in my control of whatever I want to put in here. These would be all those data types that I put in there. I think if it's an unsupported data type, it'll just convert it to a string and automatically put in whatever the string value of it was. Haven't tested it, haven't delved into the custom objects, but theoretically, if you were to have like an object that you were submitting that had an object as a property in there, it would just convert that object to a map with its properties, whatever was public. That's not, why did I put display message? It should be current user dot display name, not message, name. Okay, so then, since this is a promise, I can say once I get this back, I actually want to clear out whatever they put into that message input. So, what are you doing? Oh. There's my function. I just want to set the value to be an empty string. And we're good. So now, oh, hey, Fred. So now I'm just going to put this in here. What the? What?
it because you need to set the button to?
Oh yeah, I need to. Thank you, Jace.
No
Thank you.
problem,
Thank you for
Brendan.
pointing out my missteps. I actually need to tell it to do something. Okay, so that should be fairly easy. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I just want to make sure I put this in the right spot. Where is the right spot?
You're probably getting suggestions right now.
I probably am. That's great. Ah, there it is. Okay. It wasn't what I was thinking it was. So up here in my DOM, I'm just gonna say that for document.get element by ID, for my message form, whenever it submits, add event listener, submit, I just want to call that send message, and that should theoretically. What? What? Document reference call. Okay. I had this error last night. Oh my gosh. Okay, call with an invalid data, unsupported, value type of undefined, found in field message. Okay, let's take a look.
Your app's already popular.
I know, it's so popular. I don't know why I didn't do this before. I mean, it's not like I've been meaning to make this thing for like a month now, or a year now. Oh, that's why. I didn't put a hash in here. There we go. So now... There we go! Woo! We made it! So now on your devices, you should be able to see that message. So, that is pretty much everything I had to cover here. I have the slide deck up. I have this entire repository up on GitHub if you're interested in cloning it down and messing around. It'll be the same repository for the talk I'm giving next month. I will actually be going over all this, but on Android, at the Google Dev Fest that is happening next month. So be sure to show out if you're wanting to know more information about Firebase for mobile apps. And I can almost guarantee I won't flub up as much, just because I'm more familiar with it. But yes, does anyone have any questions about Firebase? Because there are so many different things you can do with it. Yes?
So, the thing that interests me is, if I'm looking at this, so Slack has an API, but if you wanted to make a Slack Lite on the web like this to integrate into something, how long do you think it would take you to do it?
Depends. So this project itself that I spun up, I probably spent about 5 hours total just making sure that everything was mostly bug-free and all that stuff. If you're wanting to, mind you, none of this stuff has any protections against it. Firestore allows you to have custom security settings and all that stuff. It mainly just depends on what you're wanting to do. So if you're wanting to do stuff like Slack, you need to support uploads, which you can do with this. You would just also need to leverage the Firebase Storage, which is an option that you can use to store user profile, file uploads, those kinds of things.
I mean, like different, like support topics and threads.
Say that again?
Like topics and threads. So actually, so you'd have to actually have your like div container and say, okay, here's, and collapse it.
Yeah, you could do that. So essentially, in my file tree that I have, if we just take a look here, let me just actually reload it so you can see what it looks like from all the messages. So in this instance, the way Firestore works is you have a collection of objects, which has a collection of documents, which can have a collection of fields, and also can have nested collections, which can then have documents. And so in this case, you would essentially, if you wanted to, you could have your top level collection be all your messages, and then within it, you could have, or you'd have your threads here of your different channels, and you put the documents in there. Yeah, yeah.
So that's pretty powerful to be able to just set this up like this.
Slack
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
uses Firebase as part of its backend.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I don't know what portions of Firebase they use, but I do know that they have publicly gone on the record say that they do use Firebase, and whenever Firebase is being shown off at presentations, generally Slack is one of the ones that Google likes to put in there that does user services. I think they use it for some of the analytics on mobile. I don't know how much of it they use for the backend for their databases, but I do know that they use all these analytics stuff down here that you can use on their mobile. Any other questions about Firebase? Any in the chat? Oh, yeah. I mean, I didn't know that there was safe parsing in here. So that's a good find, Jason. I didn't. Actually, it probably isn't, but I don't know.
Nobody hit my site, so that's good.
Well, that's good. Yeah. Again, Google does all the magic on the back end with their Firebase stuff. They've got their own security stuff, so that might be where it's being intercepted. I have no idea. Yeah. Anything else?
So, Kit,
Mm-hmm.
Firebase, so it's hosting your stuff?
Yes. So,
Can you host it simultaneously, like, through Tor hidden services also?
well, if you're wanting to host it through, I mean, you could serve your same site through Tor, but you would need to have your own machine serving it. Firebase is its own service with a CDN. It itself cannot serve to Tor. But if you wanted to serve your same site on a Tor hidden service, you totally could do that. You just have to have your own Tor server running. Did that answer your question? Did that answer your question? Anything else? Yes.
So Fred said he missed the part as to why you can't use this with .NET, and was wondering what was.
Okay, well, you can use Firebase with .NET. You can't use the hosting with .NET. You cannot host a .NET application in Firebase Cloud Hosting. It's designed mainly for JavaScript frameworks and progressive web apps. So that's its big wheelhouse. Is anything that's run with like a Node backend, it will do well. Anything static, it will do really well. But if you're having stuff like PHP that's being served, anything that has to have a server compiling code when it runs, it will not work. Anything else? Yes.
Can I just move my domain from where I currently have it on and run everything through Firebase?
You could, yes.
Since I got the GoDaddy stuff.
Yeah, yes. Yes, you totally 100% can.
That would be so much cheaper.
Yes. Any other questions?
And it comes with encryption?
Yes, it comes with free SSLs backed by Let's Encrypt. So my site up here, this was within almost immediately. I had my Let's Encrypt on here. If you're verifying a new domain, it could take a day or two just to get all the DNS servers ported back over to you so they can get your certificate. But since I already had my account verified, as soon as I set up the service and it registered that it was able to hit this URL, I got my certificate immediately.
Does Google read all your information and feed it through their neural network?
Of course.
That is not a question I can answer. Yes, there are terms and conditions for using Firebase. If you use Firebase Authentication in an actual production environment, I believe it is required, if not heavily told, that you should have your own terms and conditions and privacy policy. If you're using the Firebase UI, they have properties that you can use to set a URL to where people can find that data. So whenever you're doing login, you're compliant with whatever regulations there may be wherever you're operating. They also have a section in Firebase for Gdpr, for you to elect who your Gdpr representative is. If you plan to do anything in the EU and you get in trouble for some reason, you can elect your privacy representatives of who can contact you regarding privacy concerns.
Does
As long as you're not doing stuff in Europe, you're good. Anything else? Going once? Going twice? Okay. If anyone ever has any questions, feel free to reach out to me.